So welcome back to the Safe Wellbeing podcast with me, Katie, and I am delighted that I have been joined today by Scott Munn of Scott Munn and Co. Funeral Directors. There we go. I always want to get it right. Not far from myself, just at the other side of Glasgow. But Scott, I'm going to leave it up to you to tell anyone listening or watching back who is Scott and who is Scott Munn and Co.
Brilliant. Thanks, Kate. Well, first of all, thanks very much for having me on. So yeah, it's what it is on what it says on the tin, I suppose. It's me. So my background has always been in funerals. I come from a family business, which I think at the time was the oldest, certainly the oldest family funeral business in Scotland. They started in 1811. So it was going for well over 200 years when the business was sold a few years back to one of the larger companies. I started in the business when I was 15, 14 actually, furnishing coffins and then washing cars and leaving school to go on and work in the family business and become a funeral director. And just kind of worked my way through. So I've worked for a couple of different companies since then, since we sold the business. I stayed on with the company that bought us over for a few years and became one of the operational managers there, covering a large part of Glasgow and some of the West as well. And then left and worked for another company and was delighted just over a year ago now to be able to bring the family name back to the local area with my own place, which is Scott Munn & Co. Funeral Directors. So yeah, it's been a productive first year for the business, and I was delighted with, as I say, being able to get the business off the ground and be able to offer the service from the family again in the local area.
I think that's key. When I was kind of reading about it, I love how you put your family focused, family owned, family managed, and I love how like all the F's and just how it
absolutely
that's key. And that's kind of a point that. But I wanted to start on a point, like we've had quite a few chats now, and I felt this was a good place to start. But because you are male in the industry, having to be okay and coming from your background, obviously, being a part of the generation, of the family coming through and then being sold out and then coming back again, being able to put the name back out locally and do it yourself. How has that been for you about being male in the industry through all that tradition to obviously the present day?
So yeah, I suppose it's been, I think it's changed a lot. And I think it's changed a lot, particularly over the recent years in the trade in general. The expectations and what it means, and I suppose what the demands are. It was always like, I mean, don't get me wrong, I never not wanted to be in the family business or do that, but it was just an expectation that that's what you would do. As part of the family, and like you say, being male, it was always predominantly, it's been a kind of male-dominated industry, I think. Everybody would agree with that over, especially years gone by. So it was like that whole thing of that's what you're going to do. As the next male of the family, that's it. And as I say, I was fortunate because it was what I wanted to do. I don't know how it would have been if I didn't want to do that though. I'm not really sure, to be honest, how my dad would have felt about that. Or I never felt any pressure in terms of having to go into the business. But as I say, it never came up because it was just, I'd already decided that's what I was going to do. But I think now, like, it's probably different because being a male and dealing with everything, it's like we spoke about often about the lack of willingness from males to speak up and talk about things and have those conversations. It's different now, and I think there's a lot more focus on that.
Do you think then, when speaking about if you didn't want to go into the business, or kind of hypothetically speaking, if you'd went to your dad and tried to speak up, those years ago rather than, dad today, do you think it would have been taken on differently because of not really being able to speak at that time, whereas maybe now it's treated a bit more normal than it used to be?
Definitely, I think so, Katie, 100%. I mean, I don't think it's not a criticism of any of my dad or my grandfather or anything, but I don't think there would ever have been the ability for them to sit and have a conversation about how, whether they wanted to do this or wanted to do that, or how they felt about things. Probably the same as many businesses, especially, I think it's only really starting to begin to even think about change now. It's so new in terms of that concept of change or the ability to speak up. But I don't think, like, you know, conversations that I have with staff in the business now, I don't think they're conversations that would ever have took place even 10 years ago. And again, that's not a criticism of anybody or any of the leaders in any of those businesses at those times, but just a fact. I honestly don't think there would have been scope for those conversations in any funeral family business anywhere.
Different observations, yeah, and it's amazing how it's changed. So from that, then, you know, why is it important, right, for yourself as a male as well as other males, you know, to talk, share their feelings, struggles, especially in the profession? Like why the importance? Why the emphasis on that importance now?
So when I think, I mean, I'm asked all the time, Kate, it's something, again, we spoke about before, what makes a good funeral director? And I always say the same thing, and it's because I genuinely believe it's understanding the importance of what we do. And in order for me to be the best I can be for the families that I'm caring for, I need to be the best version of myself, you know. And I think if I'm not functioning at 100% or not looking after myself in that sense, then I'm not delivering the best I can to the families. And I think speaking about the pressures of the job, the business, is so important, you know, to have that release. Even when things are going good, I think it's good to debrief and you know, speak about where I'm at, you know, as well as physically, but mentally as well in terms of my health, you know. And I think that's so important now, because it's been for years and years it was never spoke about. So funeral directors would deal with all these complex, difficult situations, but they would never speak up about it. And it's not to say that you're going and breaching confidentiality or, you know, talking about a particular situation, but there's no doubt over the years, times where people have required help and input, even just to have that conversation with somebody. You know, you're constantly trying to fix things and be there for other people. But at times you need to kind of look at yourself sometimes, I think, and say, actually, am I all right? Am I doing okay? You know? So to me, it's so important, especially for the business now, to function, given the variety of the scenarios that we encounter, the different families that we care for, and the situations that we have to deal with. And you'll know yourself, you know, sometimes you deal with a family and it is a proper celebration of life, and it can be, you know, I suppose pleasant maybe isn't the right word, but it can be nice to be a part of helping the family with that, because it's a proper celebration of life and they're coming together to, you know, to do something special. But other times it can be really tragic. It can be sudden, and it can be a lot to deal with. And I think for years it's been a case of you're a man, you're a funeral director. That's just what you do. Get on with it. But it's not been the case, you know.
And would you say then that, you know, in your experience now, you've got a lot of years in the industry, nearly 20 years in the industry?
Yeah, just under 20 years. Yeah.
The difference that you'll have seen from being a male, you know, in a male-dominated industry, very much still, you'll have seen the change, you know, from the bottom of that ladder, that we have started climbing it a bit better now, and allowing men to, you know, be able to share in. Have you found the difference in that part, like your business and like what you're all a part of, you know, that's been a bit easier? It's been a nice kind of, yeah.
Definitely. I think it's probably more expected and more accepted now for men to open up a bit more. As I say, I still don't think it's anywhere near where it needs to be, and where it should be. But like, I think now that we're more aware of it, the industry is heading in the right direction. Things like what you're doing with this, you know, for example, you know, even maybe 3-4 years ago, there wouldn't have been the thought of that would have been
out, yeah.
You know, so it's stuff like that I think is massively important. But I do think we're starting to see that shift now, and you can see the changes, and it is easing a bit in terms of the stress and the pressures, because there isn't as much. There's still the stigma, but it's nowhere near as much as it was.
So for you, the biggest challenges that you've seen now, we touched about this before, and anyone, you know, listening or watching this conversation back, there was a helicopter accident in Glasgow. How many years ago would it have been now, Clutha?
Oh,
quite a few years now.
Yeah, it's been a few years now. Yep.
And unfortunately, the helicopter ended up on the roof of the pub. It was a very traumatic kind of thing for locally in Scotland. And, you know, you shared with me, you know, what you had to see, what you had to go through, kind of the feelings and all the emotions with that. In terms of like that being a challenge that you had to go through, you know, looking after yourself, like you talked about before, in your own, you know, well-being, as well as being a male, keep it, you know, present. What would you have liked to have seen differently, or, you know, allowed you to do differently that ensured that what you had to see, what you had to hear about, what you had to go through, emotions wise, could have been different to help you, that now could be someone else listening back to this as advantage if they have to see a different or a difficult scenario that they're faced with.
So I think the key thing or the sort of main thing I remember about that particular incident, Katie, was that irrespective of the size and scale, and that there was a lot of media coverage around that at the time, but that was something that was like, there was never a thought other than that's just part of your job and it's no different. And to a degree, that is true, absolutely. But there was never a focus on the severity or the scale of what that was. So we were, again, it's not a criticism of the company that I worked for at the time, because it was just something that wasn't looked at. But on reflection, when you look back at what that was, it was a really traumatic, situation to be a part of and deal with. And there wasn't really any support offered at all. And I think there was no even sort of proactive support in terms of before, when we were aware that we were going to be, handling that situation and dealing with that aspect of it. Even at that point, there was no, I suppose, sort of build up of training to what we were going to do. And I don't mean from the practical sense in terms of what we were doing, because what we would do would be the same that we would do every day, across the city. In terms of the process and why we were there. But in a situation like that, let's be honest, it's completely different circumstances, So I don't think there was any awareness. And again, I think that's a bigger picture thing in terms of being down to the fact that you're a funeral director, that's that you work in that particular area of the business, that's your job. It's a big deal, but you just get on with it.
And then going back to your work on the Monday morning, you know what I mean? Or
exactly.
Going back to the next day, you're just, it's just been another challenge, another family, and you're just sort of, as you said before, you are male, you are a funeral director, and that's your job. And separate that from, who is Scott, who is the male doing that, and how are they then looked after. And I totally agree that it's been missed, but I think it was nice to highlight that situation. That was a big event in Scotland that's still spoken about now, and there was a lot of media coverage, but then no one looks at that, or no one thinks about that other side of it.
There was loads of conversations at the time around the first responders that responded, and they were obviously able to save many lives that night as well. But even after the event, in terms of the recovery of the remains and the recovery of the scene and the situation as well. Speaking about and rightfully so, because what an incredible job they did in terms of the police, the paramedics, the fire service, all the different resources that were involved. But there was never a thought or a mention for the team that dealt with it from our aspect, from the funeral directing perspective. And as I say, just to be clear, we're not speaking about the actual funerals. We're talking about the recovery of the remains from the scene and things like that. And we were heavily involved with that. But as I say, there wasn't any support there at all.
And how did you look after yourself then after that?
I probably didn't, Katie, to be honest, because again, it was like the mindset at the time, which was drilled into us, that it isn't any different and it's your job and you get on with it, and it wasn't. I suppose we didn't really debrief after any of those situations. So I think like many of my colleagues who were involved as well, we almost kind of neglected ourselves and just got on with things.
What would you then have done if it happened last night, right, or yesterday? Last night, yes.
Sure.
How would you have then walking away from that, right? How would you have looked after yourself now, being the Scott who you are today?
I think I would be much more self-aware of the severity of the situation and the impact that could have on me, and have a better understanding that, even as a funeral director, you're not immune to any of these situations. We don't get emotionally involved with families or anything. We try not to do that. It's difficult at times because you're human, but we try and remain on the right side of that, I suppose, in order to give the best support. But you are human at the end of the day, and in a situation like that, I think anybody doing that who would say they weren't affected would need to be really, really thick-skinned, or have a different outlook certainly from me on life. I think being much more self-aware, and I think being able to, I would certainly be much better equipped to support my colleagues. And I think I would be proactive in terms of making sure that the people who were doing that job, we're really in the right space to do that in terms of being strong enough mentally to deal with that, because I don't think it's something for everybody, and it's not. Let's be honest, in our line of work, you come across death and grief every single day, but there's different scenarios and different circumstances, and a situation like that is quite unique. But nonetheless, it's something that unfortunately can happen, and I think now I would be better equipped to cope with it and understand the process that I would need to go through in terms of debriefing from a situation like that.
And then it would allow you to, as you said before, be your 100% self for your other families that you represent.
Exactly, yeah.
I kind of want to change the path a little bit, because, I want to acknowledge what you've started this year, and it's the group Men with Issues.
Yep.
And I felt it was very fitting. So I'm going to hand it back to you. What is it? Why is it happening? And the benefits.
Sure. So I got involved with the group just about, it's probably about 12 weeks ago now. And it's a safe space that's been created for men from anywhere in Scotland. It's based in Glasgow, who can come and speak. And to be honest, when the group was started, we didn't really know how it was going to work and what the format was going to be. I suppose we didn't really know at that point either, Katie, being totally honest, what the purpose of the group was. But it's evolved into this, as I say, this safe space for men to come and talk, listen, and share any situations that they're going through and get support. None of us in the room are therapists or trained doctors or anything like that, but there's a lot of lived experience in the room, and I think that's massive. So that's grown now from having, I think there was like 15 people at our first meeting, to now we've got like 50, 60 people come every week to the group, and it's grown every week. We've had to change venue to accommodate the amount of people. We have had different people come and speak from different professional backgrounds, some from that world of therapy and professional self-help, etc. So there's a bit of structure there, and we try and provide the group with something every week that they can take away. Also, some weeks we have some members of the group who have been through different situations come and share and their experience and their story. And I think every week, even people that come and maybe don't speak, they take something away from it. So it's probably one of the most powerful things I think I've ever been involved in, and probably one of the things that I'm most proud to be a part of. The benefits of it, I think we've different ends of the spectrum, I suppose, but we've had people come who have been on the brink of potentially taking their own life, and the group has been able to intervene and help. And as I say, we're not the ones providing that professional help, but we've been able to signpost the people from where they are, support them in that initial period, and then get them the help that they need if that's professional help. It's giving people a purpose. Really, really helps so many people. Even as I say, people come. There's somebody that came for, I think it was like 7 weeks, and they never really spoke. And then one day they spoke to me and said, like, the past 7 weeks, my life has just went like that, and got better and better. Even if that's just through getting an understanding that they're not alone.
Yeah, which is the big understanding, I think, for
absolutely. Anyone. 100%. And there's people as young as like 17, 18 come to the group, and there's men in their late 60s that have came to the group as well, and equally said that they've got as much benefit from it.
Amazing. And I asked you this before when we had a chat and I was getting to know about men with issues, and I asked you, and I'm going to ask you again because I think I loved your answer, and I think that someone that works in the industry and very heavily involved in the industry, you go along every week, and the question that I asked you before was, does it help you in your role within the funeral industry? And I want you to answer that for everyone listening or watching again, because sure. I felt your answer was so powerful.
Sure. Yeah, 100%. There's absolutely no denying it. It helps massively. Every single week for me to be humbled by sitting in that room and listening to what's going on out there and having an understanding of people's situations. I think as well, like there's, as I say, so many different personalities and different backgrounds in the room, but the theme is common in terms of there's so many people needing help there. And having an understanding of that, and then being able to look at and assist colleagues day to day as well. It's just, as I say, it's powerful stuff, and it helps massively, without a doubt.
And for you, you know, if you've had a stressful day at the office or, you know, a harder week, knowing that you even have that space for you, you know, as much as you're everyone else, you get the benefit out of it as well.
100%. I went there thinking that I was going to help the group.
Yeah.
So I went there with the purpose of giving and giving and giving, and thinking, you know, I'll be able to help some people. I've had, you know, a reasonable amount of life experience and had my struggles at times as well. So, and in actual fact, I've taken so much more from that. You know, it has helped me massively. And sometimes at the end of the week, I go there and it allows me to go home being Scott to my family, rather than going home and being, my head still spinning with work and everything else. I mean, being a funeral director, you never really switch off.
Yes, yeah, not quite.
But it's been, as I say, so powerful.
And for you then, you know, I think that follows on nicely, you know, the benefits and importance of your well-being today, the well-being of men within the industry, you know, as you say, it allows you to switch off and be Scott at home. Does that allow you then to come back into the job either the next day or, you know, gives you the weekend back in the Monday, you know, allow you to deal with the job on a daily basis at a more optimal level to allow you to have standards that you want and have for your business?
100%. Yeah, definitely. Having that release and being able to speak to people. And as I say, we don't divulge anything. You know, I wouldn't go into any detail about particular situations, but I can speak to the group in confidence about how I'm feeling, maybe reflecting on a particular situation, and, you know, that ability to have that release. And as I say, an understanding of that pressure and what it means to be able to clearly view that and step outside the box for a bit. Again, I think it's been massive. You know, it clears my head at the end of the week. You know, it really does.
I think that's amazing. That makes me happy in the sense of, you know, having that. I think a lot of us, it's neglected still, but
100%.
hopefully, you know, even listening back to this conversation, it's going to highlight that and it's going to share it. And coming on to that, what would say, like, first of all, your biggest lessons that you've learned as a funeral director, as somebody in the profession, throughout your years of experience, through all the challenges that you've faced, been able to look after yourself, like, what would be your one biggest lesson that you've learned up until today?
I think if you're in relation to me being able to look after myself, I think it's probably, I talk about understanding the importance of the little things for families, you know, and we put all this focus on that because that's our job and that's what we're there to do. But it's a bit, what we do is a big thing. And I think I've probably underestimated that for years and years and spread myself too thin. And I've never not been able to deliver to any of the families that I've been privileged enough to look after. But I've probably put myself at detriment during that process through not looking after myself. So I think in terms of the lesson is self-care is vital, and, you know, you need to look after yourself in order for me to be able to look after other people to the best of my ability, which is my main purpose. At one of the worst times in my life, I need to make sure that I'm okay, you know, and I can't fill somebody else's cup up if mine is empty. You know, so I think for me that would be vital.
I think the analogy, and I think I said this to you before when we spoke, you know, I heard something before and it was a bottle of water. And what they described it as was, if we were sitting in a room with a family and we're the funeral director arranging things, in order to be able to fill up their cups at the time of arrangement, making crucial decisions, and as you say, the smaller decisions, we had to fill up our bottle of water first in order to be able to pour it to all the family
100%.
members that are entrusting us. That's kind of, that's special. It gives you goosebumps because it's special because of the job that we do. You know, it allows us to be looked after to ensure we can then look after. And from that, like, any tips or advice, especially from a male perspective, you know, that may help a male start speaking, you know, maybe share, maybe begin to look after themselves a bit better, you know, begin to break a bit of the stigma that's still around, you know.
Sure.
If you could share any tips or advice for anyone listening, especially in the male dominant industry still.
I think it's opening up is vital, and I think it's a hard thing to do, and a lot of people maybe don't feel that they have that safe space. But having a bit of, you know, I suppose finding the trust in somebody, and somebody, whether it's a colleague or a family member, but somebody you can open up to and make aware of your situation. And the more you tell them, the better likelihood of them getting a decent understanding of the situation. will be. So I think, as I say, speaking up is the main thing, Katie, absolutely. And I think as well, like, just be kind. Do you know what I mean? It's that whole thing. Like, even sometimes that can strike up the trust in the relationship and maybe create a safe space with somebody you might not expect, whether it's a colleague, a friend, or a family member. But having somebody to speak to, and I can't stress enough that nobody's ever alone, and you're never the only person going through that situation, because I think it's amazing. It's so powerful. Again, referring back to the group, on a Friday night, we see people come and they'll say something that the whole room can resonate with, but they might also in the same breath say, I've never told anybody that. You know, and it's quite a powerful thing to hear somebody say that. So I think the amount of people out there that maybe are worried about speaking up about how they feel, people would take courage from what you say and the ability to speak up. So I can't stress enough, you know, find somebody you can talk to and talk to them.
Yeah, it's like that that expression that you see a lot, especially online and things, that it's okay not to be okay.
Yeah.
And I think in the funeral industry, you know, I certainly raised the message, you know, it's okay, I wasn't okay. And you have to, you know, work through things, and it's the importance of the well-being and that. And at the end of the day, you know, the message, and I think it's a really good message from this conversation, especially to males within the industry who are possibly listening to this, you know, it's okay for you not to be okay, and you're not alone. You know, we are an industry, we have such a unique understanding of one another. And I think when we go to these events and, you know, we end up meeting up at, you know, the AGMs and things, you know, that message is clear because we're all there for the same reasons. We're all coming together to celebrate that, to find out all the next informations or the changes that are happening, and just know, you know, that you can strike up these conversations
100%.
Unexpectedly.
It's funny because, like, off the back of other podcasts and things I've done, and I've spoken a wee bit in detail about in general terms about what we do, because a lot of people, that if you're not in the industry, you don't have an understanding of what we do. You know, you think it's just walking in front of the desk. You know, it's that whole thing. And then, like, people come up to me and go, wow, like, how do you deal with that? How do you? And I'm like, well, I'm guilty of saying the thing that I say to other people. You know, it's like,
it's just what I do.
It's just what I do. And it's like, so we're all in a room, we're all like-minded in terms of being, you know, professionals in the same industry. But, like, so none of us, I think, really appreciate what the magnitude of what each other does, because it's what we all do, and we're normal. Whereas if we were in a room full of people from 5 or 6 other industries, they'd probably be saying, wow, it's a lot you do, it's a lot you deal with. Like, how do you cope with that? And, like, this is only a question that we've started asking of each other, as I say, as recent as the past year. So how do you cope? Like, are you okay with that? How do you deal with that? And it's like everybody kind of goes, well, nobody's ever asked me that before, so I don't know. I've never thought about it, so I don't know.
And
so
how
again,
it's like Safe's message with being stronger together. I think, you know, through Safe Wellbeing and this podcast is amazing, because we can help raise this, and it's really exciting to, you know, to have you on. But if anyone wants to look up, you know, men with issues, where can they find out about it, or just kind of it gives them an idea to look for something more locally where they are?
So it's on. We're on Instagram at the moment, just for the handle at NWI Men with Issues, and we've got a website coming soon, hopefully. So we've become more accessible to a wider range of people. And if anybody was interested in learning more about the group or having a chat, then they can always reach out to me as well. You can find me on social media. So
yeah, I can second that. And I've had a look at the Instagram, you know, and it's full of information. It certainly, like, allowed me to walk away with different ideas as well. So I know, you know, even anyone listening or watching that goes for a little nosy in the background, yeah, they'll definitely be able to see how much it's helping, and the people that are there. It's very vast, which is amazing. It just shows, you know, you're creating that platform for everyone, and that's special.
100%, and it's allowed me to be much more aware of, I suppose, colleague wellbeing across the business as well. You know, which I couldn't say enough how important that is. We just had 6 members of staff, myself included, go through mental health first aid training over the past few days as well. So now you get 6 mental health first aiders available to the wider staff group as well. So yeah, having the conversations, I think it's, you know, it's just as important as physical health, if not more now.
Yeah, massively. No, Scott, that has been amazing. Thank you so much for joining me and doing this podcast. Hopefully anyone can take anything away from what we spoke about today, And as you say, if they want to have a chat with you further or anything about men with issues, they can reach out to you.
Yep, brilliant. Thanks very much, Katie.
Not a problem. Thanks, Scott.
Cheers.